These are my annotations for Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. The first note says, if the victims don't know they're victims, then they don't realize the injustice they're enduring. And I highlighted, it is better for the victims of injustice not to recognize themselves as such. Sectarianism fed by fanaticism is always castrating. Radicalization nourished by a critical spirit is always creative. Sectarianism mythicizes and thereby alienates. Radicalization criticizes and thereby liberates. Radicalization involves increased commitment to the position one has chosen and thus even greater engagement in the effort to transform concrete, objective reality. Conversely, sectarianism, because it is mythicizing and irrational, turns reality into a false and therefore unchangeable reality. The rightist sectarian differs from his or her leftist counterpart in that the former attempts to domesticate the present so that he or she hopes the future will reproduce this domesticated present. The latter considers the future pre-established, a kind of inevitable fate, fortune, or destiny. They both suffer from an absence of doubt. Because it is a distortion of being more fully human, sooner or later being less human leads to the oppressed to struggle against those who made them so. Are they viewing those injustices as generosities? In order to have the continued opportunity to express their generosity, the oppressors must perpetuate injustice as well. This says, the very structure of their thought has been conditioned by the contradiction to the concrete existential situation by which they were shaped. As if were they essentially Pavloved. How can one change from oppressed to oppressor with something as simple as a promotion? Don't let others tell you how you should feel. Authenticity is important in separating yourself from a group, breaking away from the status quo. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he will eat for the rest of his life. To deny the importance of subjectivity in the process of transforming the world and history is naive and simplistic. There would be no human action if there were no objective reality, no world to be the not I of the person and to challenge them, just as there would be no human action if humankind were not a project, if he or she were not able to transcend himself or herself, if one were not able to perceive reality and understand it in order to transform it. Violence is initiated by those who oppress, who exploit, who fail to recognize others as persons, not to those who are oppressed, exploited, and unrecognized. Consciously or unconsciously, the act of rebellion by the oppressed, an act of which is always or nearly always as violent as the initial violence of the oppressors, can initiate love. An act of is oppressive only when it prevents people from being more fully human. But even when the contradiction is resolved authentically by a new situation established by the liberated laborers, the former oppressors do not feel liberated. Maybe the oppressed wouldn't be so ungrateful and envious if they were allowed to have any sort of possessions. If you surround yourself with those that think poorly of you, you will soon begin to think poorly of yourself. How could you unknowingly be teaching with the banking method? Violence is not the answer to end violence. Training the brain to think independently. They must observe multiple aspects of their daily lives to understand them.